our mind runs our body, right? Our subconscious mind takes control of all of the autonomic processes. We don't think about it. And so what is feeding into that subconscious mind? It's nothing except really like a computer.
Mm.
And so the programs kind of go in there. And so it assesses the programs and then, okay, how are we going to run this body in response to those programs?
Hi, and welcome back, everyone, to the Integrative Women's Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jessica Drummond, and I am so excited to introduce you today to Jane Hogan. She has her own experience with healing from complex chronic pain related to autoimmune disease. And I know that pretty much everyone in our community has some experience with chronic pain, either in your practice or in your own body. And we're going to talk about today, I think, the most fascinating work that Jane does, which is what do we do when all the diets and the supplements and the exercise programs and the manual therapy isn't enough? I wouldn't say it doesn't work because, Jane, you'd probably agree with this. Like, we make some progress, but then what's the next level of healing? So welcome, Jane.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm so happy to be here. I love talking about this and I love sharing it with people. So just thank you for the opportunity.
Before we dive into the tools that you use, can you tell us a bit about what, you were originally an engineer. So why this second career? What was the inspiration?
I know I was, 30 years as a civil engineer and now the wellness engineer.
Mm-hmm.
I was like happily moving along in my career, very close to retirement, right after 30 years. But before retirement, I developed rheumatoid arthritis after I had a really stressful year. All of a sudden, within 3 months, barely able to walk.
Mm.
And I basically figured it out and reversed it. Wasn't very quick. It was a circuitous kind of route, but I did it using kind of natural stuff. I was working with a naturopath and all that in the beginning. And then I would kind of get so far and I knew there was something I was missing. So I figured out the other puzzle pieces. And actually, even before I started healing, I kind of had this experience where it might sound a little woo-woo, but I'll just go with it. I had this experience where I was like, if this is the way my life is going to be and all this pain and I can't do anything that I've been waiting to do my whole life in retirement, travel and all this, then I'm ready to be done. And the next moment I like heard a voice or knowing in my head said, you're going to figure this out and you'll teach other people.
Mm.
And so I felt this calling, Jessica, to do this. I couldn't just I was teaching engineering. I didn't want to teach that anymore because I felt like I had something that I knew now that was more valuable and would really change people's lives. I mean, I love teaching engineering, but this is different. I hear all the time now that people, their lives are changed because of what they're learning. And so this is what I love to do now.
That's wonderful. So you and I were talking about how often when people are diagnosed with an autoimmune disease or chronic pain, there's sort of this pathway through the health system that they will often take. So conventional medicine has certain medication tools to sort of suppress symptoms of autoimmune disease or try to stabilize the immune system in some way. And that is an okay option sometimes, and sometimes we can do pain management, but it's not really a root cause healing perspective. Then people will move to work with people like me, functional nutrition or functional medicine or naturopathic medicine, and they will have sort of recommendations, and then they're ready to go deeper and work with those of us who are either also coaches or are coaches that collaborate with other clinicians in a multidisciplinary way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd love to talk about the coaching piece because there are lots of books written about autoimmunity and lots of kind of nutrition plans and immune balancing supplementation. But when that is not enough, which is often the case. People sort of hit a wall or they don't sustain the changes that they have been,
Mhm.
co-creating with their nutritionists or functional medicine practitioners. They're like, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this nutrition plan, and they do it for 6 weeks or something, and then they sort of don't stick to it. So what's the next step when it comes to a coaching model to support both consistency and the deeper social, emotional, autonomic nervous system pieces?
Yeah, I mean, I went that path working with a functional medicine practitioner, and I would, it would help, right? And I was doing the anti-inflammatory diets, and that helped, and I was taking the supplements and then dealing with the infections. Turned out I had SIBO. And I
Mm,
thought every time I thought, okay, this is the answer. This is the answer. And I would get a bit better, but I would still have flares, right? Which is a sign that the disease is still, yeah, let's call it dis-ease, is
mhm,
still there in the body. Anyway, along my path, I was working with that functional medicine practitioner, and I wanted to kind of like, how am I going to tell this story? So I actually went into coaching, the health functional medicine certified health coaching, because, well, it was a 1 year thing I could do online. I wasn't going to go back at my age then and train for years to be a functional medicine doctor.
mhm,
So I kind of did this to learn a bit more about functional medicine, but made with the possibility that maybe that would be the route. And when I got into the program, we had a mind body component every single month. I had always really been interested in that kind of thing, even though I was like very engineer type of person. I also believed in the mind body connection. I knew that there was something to it. And so for me, that was the missing puzzle piece, that there's more going on. Our mind runs our body, right? Our subconscious mind takes control of all of the autonomic processes. We don't think about it. And so what is feeding into that subconscious mind? It's nothing except really like a computer.
mm,
And so the programs kind of go in there. And so it assesses the programs, and then, okay, how are we going to run this body in response to those programs? And so I came to realize that I knew that my illness had been brought on by stress.
mm.
But it was like that was a sudden stress. My mother had died suddenly, and
I'm
I was
sorry.
the executor, and I had a lot to deal with. Plus, I mean, I was dealing with grief. She was my best friend.
Mm,
And then I also had the house to deal with that my parents had lived in for 50 years, and they were travelers and collectors. And I had three siblings. So, there was a lot going on. So I thought that was the stress.
mm,
But I came to realize that I'd really had stress my whole life. I didn't have a traumatic childhood, I wouldn't say, but we've all got messages, along our life. And so I had a message being the third sibling, a third child in the family, the older siblings. And I got the message that I kind of didn't matter that much, or I didn't have anything to say that was valuable or whatever. So I had this underlying kind of sense of stress my whole life that I wasn't even aware of it. It's so
mhm,
subconscious, right?
mhm,
And so there's working with that to regulate the nervous system, because all of this is that undercurrent of stress puts our nervous system in that constant stress response. And then it can't deal with infections. And then it can't deal with digestion very well. Our immune system gets weak. Our endocrine system doesn't function like it should. So our reproductive system, like all of our systems, are not operating on an all is well basis. They're operating on a, you know,
right, right.
I could die, because the brain really can't tell the difference. I love this little expression. I don't know where I heard it first. Can't tell the difference between taxes and tigers.
True.
Taxes,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm,
I'm not wanted are equally life threatening to the brain.
mhm,
And so we have to work on those messages. And so that to me was where, when all else isn't working, then probably these things need to be addressed. And that's regulating the nervous system. And there's lots of ways to do that.
So, what are some of the tools then? So, and I'm assuming that people will continue addressing the physical, they'll continue eating the anti inflammatory diet, they'll continue slowly getting movement back in their lives? And what are some of the tools of changing that slow subconscious undercurrent of you're not enough,
Hmm.
or whatever the messages are, this is too much for me to carry, you haven't paid your taxes, who's in charge of that, like whatever it is, what are the tools to shift those messages? What are some of the more healing messages, first of all?
Mm. Well, you're right. There's the lifestyle factors, and if you follow functional medicine, there are like the 5 modifiable lifestyle factors, which include your diet and movement and prioritizing sleep and lowering stress. But to me, that's a huge one,
Hmm.
and your relationships, right? So there's those lifestyle factors which are tied to habits,
Hmm.
right? And so require habit change, which that's kind of part of it. And I find that when people are trying to muscle through habit change, because I got to, and they're fighting against a nervous system that's dysregulated, it's very hard to do. But when we kind of come and we address some of these other things, which I'll talk about now, then it makes it easier to follow up and follow through on those lifestyle changes that are going to be supportive to healing.
Hmm.
So I like to start with, like, first of all, having a vision of what
Hmm.
you want. What the one thing, what is something you're missing out on now that you can't do because of whatever health challenge you're facing, and get really clear, what does it look like, picture it in your mind, and use all your senses. And I love to adding a song because music is so
Hmm.
powerful and evokes emotions, and really it's not just the vision, it's the emotion we want to feel, because emotions are vibrations in the body, and that helps send the signal, because our cells they pick up on vibrations, right? So our cells get that, our subconscious mind starts to get this message. Okay, this, it can't tell the difference between a real and an imagined image, so it's like, okay, this is what's going on, I'm gonna support it. And it starts to, we have a reticular activating system in our brain that pays attention to what we think about most of the time. And
Hmm.
so if we're flooding our mind and our body with this image of, this is me doing what I want to do, then it starts to pick up on the things that will support that. It will start to help you follow through on behaviors that will support that. So as an example, mine was, I love hiking.
Hmm.
And at the time, when I was at my worst, I couldn't even walk around the block. I had
Hmm.
so much pain and inflammation. But I imagine myself climbing this peak. There's a second highest peak on the island of Newfoundland where I live, called Grossmore Mountain. I'd climbed it before, years before. So I was imagining myself on top of that mountain. I would even like put my arms up like I'm at the top. And the song I used was Miley Cyrus, The Climb. And to
Okay. Yeah.
me, yeah, it
Hmm.
really evoked a lot of emotion in me. And so I would, every day, like, I would just picture this. And so that was one of my tools. And I think it's a great starting point. Like, what is your goal?
That's so powerful. People, athletes have been using this same kind of strategy for as long as I've been an athlete, which is basically 50 years now. And it's our master coach in our health coaching program, Kathy, teaches an entire module on visualization and imagery, because there's so much good research
There is.
that your body and even your ability to do these things change by simply, you can actually gain muscle
Yeah.
strength and things like that by visualizing this. So I love that image. And especially because you were in this almost transition point where you were about to step into your retirement that you'd kind of seen in one way. And then all of a sudden you're like,
Not happening.
what's going on? I can barely walk around the block. I thought I was going to be like
Yeah.
hiking with my husband. So I really like that, because we know that not only is really powerful to keep people like aligned with committing to their changes, but it actually also changes people at a biochemical and physiologic level.
It
So,
it
yeah.
really does. I don't know if people really understand. It's something I talk about a lot, how, the idea that our brain and our thoughts change our chemistry,
Mm.
our biology and chemistry in the body. And so what our constant thoughts are It's going to
Yeah.
change us physically. And so that's a great tool to be able to do that. And I mean, there's so the next one of the things I talk about a lot too is kind of changing those beliefs. So I have to really talk a lot about how our brain runs our body and the beliefs. And great examples are things like talking about the placebo effect, right?
Mm.
The
Mhm.
placebo and the nocebo effect, and also I find it really fascinating with those multiple personality disorders when they've studied multiple personalities, and they'll have documented cases. One personality will have all of the blood chemistry and so on of diabetes,
Mm.
and then in another personality, all that changes. I mean, it's fascinating, right?
That's cool. I have not heard of that research. I love that. I'm gonna read all of that now.
Yeah, I mean, so it really, when people start hearing this,
Mhm.
then it kind of can shift their beliefs to, again, like even doing this exercise of visualizing every day, it's a new thing, it's a new habit. So if they can believe that it's really going to work, then it helps them do it. It just feels really good to do this visualization as well. And so so that's a great starting tool. And then there's also things like, we have, they say 60, 80,000 thoughts a day. Most of them are negative, most of them are on repeat. So that's
Mm.
what's been programming our subconscious mind.
Mhm.
So if we want a different output in the body, we need to change the input. And so another way we can do that is through repetition. It's how we learn everything. The brain is so good at learning, right? So we give it something else to learn. And I found affirmations super helpful for me, and I use them a lot, but not just like reading, I am healthy and strong.
Mhm.
Not just that, but really feeling it. So, looking in the mirror for me, I mentioned I was really close to my mother, and I didn't really realize I was doing affirmations in the beginning. In the beginning, I was kind of like imagining what my mother would say to me.
Mm.
And you're doing great, Janie. And you're coming along. Look how far you've come, and that kind of stuff. You're going to be fine. This will pass. And after a while, I realized it was switching to me saying it.
Mm.
So starting with the words I am, right? I am. And I would say things like, I am healthy and strong. I am climbing that mountain. I am, and I love this one, an example of what's possible.
Mm.
And and every day in every way, I'm finding new solutions to help me heal. Things like that. So doing a lot of those, but really feeling it. The key is in the feelings of it. So I find that powerful. And you do these things enough and repeat them enough, it's like putting seeds, right? Seeding your subconscious mind with new thoughts. So that's
Yeah.
another great tool. And some other tools are just kind of tied to that, but messages of safety.
Mhm.
So I use this a lot with my chronic pain people. There's a lot of science behind this now. We keep telling our nervous system, because when you've got an illness or you've got chronic pain or whatever, there's a lot of fear. So
Mhm.
then we get the brain. I mentioned the brain is really good at learning. It learns fear, and our brain especially pays attention to anything that's fearful.
Mhm.
And so when I used to have this fear of, even though I believed I was going to heal, every time I went to see the rheumatologist, he'd say, well, I think you should take these drugs because you're going to get permanent damage if you don't get this under control. And so talk about inducing fear, right? So I was like,
Yeah.
I got to, I didn't want, for me, I didn't want to take the meds. I'm not saying that anyone should make that choice, totally up to
Mhm.
them. But for me, that's what I wanted to do. But I had this fear of, I gotta figure this out quickly. And so that
Mm.
was creating fear. Also, I mean, I was doing the anti-inflammatory diets, and I kind of got afraid of food, and that
Mhm.
created fear as well. So we need to break that pain fear cycle. And so it's kind of like reminding your brain, I got this bit of pain in my body, but actually, like, I'm fine. In this moment right now, I'm fine. Everything's okay. I'm breathing. I'm alive. It's fine in this moment. And so it's constantly training the brain to notice whatever it is that's bothering you, whether it's noticing you've got an illness and going, but I'm fine. See, in my body, look, I'm here. I'm
Yeah.
supported by this chair. I'm breathing. All is good. So it's retraining the brain with what I call brain retraining tools, right?
Hmm.
Retraining the brain for safety because we're stuck in that non-safety, right? Which is the dysregulated nervous system.
Yeah. And I think that's so important because in both conventional and functional medicine, the tools can be challenging depending on your lifestyle, depending on your financial resources, I see this a lot of times in people who have mold illness, for example. It's like, oh my gosh, you better move out of your house and throw out all your stuff and burn it. And you know, and also, by the way, 80% of homes in the US have mold, or 60%, and 80% of workplaces. So there's also like nowhere for you to go.
Yeah,
So if that's the narrative in your own brain, it's going to actually amplify the immune system's reactivity.
exactly.
And I think that's really hard because the reality is, yes, we want to try to lower the toxic load, and the same thing with eating the anti inflammatory diet. But I do see this a lot in my clients with endometriosis because there is a lot of talk in both functional medicine and the internet. And, even my perspective is to use some anti inflammatory nutrition, but I have really shifted my practice in the last like 5 years to worry a lot less about that because of exactly what you said. Eventually, people develop food fears that is actually worse than
Mm.
occasionally just eating a piece of pizza or whatever.
Yeah, I found that too, Jessica. I started off like it was all about, okay, let's get you on this anti-inflammatory diet. I mean, yes, let's eat well. I kind of feel like planning meals is
Hmm.
kind of a little magical because when people plan meals, they usually make better choices in the last minute. But what matters more is like, how do you feel when you're eating? Because if you're in a stress state, you're not going to digest well, which means you're not going to absorb nutrients anyway.
Yeah.
So at least feel calm and enjoy your food and feel gratitude for your food. Chew slowly, right? And chew chew your food.
Yeah, actually, too. Yeah.
Yeah, actually chew your food and put your I love like to say put your utensils down, put your hands in your lap while you're chewing so that you're having to almost take a breath then before you have something else. So yeah, relaxing and how you eat and how you feel while you're eating is almost as important or more important than what you're eating.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So you're doing the lifestyle changes to the best of your ability without being too attached to them. So occasionally you're going to stay up too late, occasionally you're going to eat too fast or not perfectly or whatever. And yet you're going to be focusing on taking care of yourself in a way, and I think this is also where the subconscious mind comes in. Sometimes people have trouble sticking to 80, 85%, 90% taking care of themselves in the way that going to bed at the right time and moving their bodies and all that, because there is an undercurrent of not worthiness, or I come last, or I don't need as much help as other people, whatever it is. And what are so we've got some of the tools around reframing, affirmations. I am worthy. I need support just as much as anyone else. I'm worthy of support. I'm worthy of eating delicious salads whenever, I can. Blah, blah, blah. To really get that stuck in the brain, like, because if, you were 50-ish when this happened, right? So you had 50 years of programming before this. How long and do you have to do it in a number of different ways, the affirmations and the visualizations and the music and or how quickly can the brain adapt, how quickly can it change?
Mhm. I think that really depends on the person and what feels right for them. And I always focus on just making progress. Like if
Mm.
doing all that feels like too much, we'll just do little bits. Right.
Mhm.
Or, it feels like too much to do affirmations and you're visualizing every day. Like pick one day, one another day. It's really about just making progress and taking baby steps. If you if you keep taking baby steps, you'll still get to where you're going. Right.
Yeah.
And
And so for you, how quickly were you able to transition from literally not being able to walk out around your block
mm,
to, stepping into this new career? Because we all know starting a
mhm.
business is not the simplest thing to do.
Yes. Well, let me see. I was diagnosed, and the symptoms came on in 2016,
Mhm.
and I started right away. Well, maybe within 3 months, I
Mhm.
had heard about anti-inflammatory, and how gluten and dairy can affect joints, which I totally blew me away at the time. I had no idea. So I kind
Mhm.
of started on that, and then in the fall. So that was a few months later. I found a functional medicine doctor, and it took about a year to get the SIBO cleared up. And then it was after that that I started, and I had started the coaching program in January of 2018,
Mhm.
feeling a lot better. I finished that in 2019. And I think that was when I left my career.
Mhm.
And so by then I was a lot better. I still had some flares happening here and there, but I was a lot better. But I found I really needed that time for me to there was a lot of things I wasn't liking about my career anymore. And so that was a big stressor for me,
Yeah.
and the job environment and so on. And so getting away from that really gave me the opportunity to finally focus on me. And, I thought for years I didn't have a choice, that I had to stay
Mm.
there.
Mm.
I was lucky. Maybe I did have a choice, and it might be harder for some people. So I realize now, though, that it's not really the situation, it's how we feel about a situation. Stress isn't the thing. Stress is
Mm.
how our nervous system responds. And so
Mhm.
maybe if I had had different tools, I might have been able to respond a little bit differently. So kind of coming back to this, it's really for all of these things, it's like it's an awareness. How am I feeling? And most of us are so disconnected with, like, how am I feeling in this body? Right? We're in our head. And I had no idea the tense tenseness I had in my body. I mean, I kind of knew I used to get a lot of neck pain and shoulder pain, which very
Mhm.
common with people like feeling the weight of the world on your shoulders, right? But I had
Mhm.
this tightness in my solar plexus, and just really like not very disconnected from my body. So really being aware, like, how am I feeling? How, like, where am I? What do I feel tightness anywhere? And I use a lot of different tools for really kind of focusing on different areas of the body, whether it's tightness or whether it's pain, and coming at it, almost personifying it like it was a
Mm.
small child or a pet, to say, I got you. I'm here for you. Imagine squeezing it, giving a hug from the inside. That kind of feeling of a loving compassion towards the areas that are obviously not working that well.
Mhm.
So, and I think of it as well from, if you sort of think of an energetic kind of point of view, if we're focusing our attention on it, we're telling our brain, send energy there, send like oxygen and blood to this area and help it heal. It can't heal if it's not getting oxygen and enough blood.
Mhm.
So that's some other tools that I use, really tools of, I guess you would call it somatic type of tools, right? Getting in touch with the body.
Mhm. And like somatic self-compassion, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Hmm.
lovely. And so I want to highlight for people that it's very normal that these kinds of deep, more full recoveries take years, and that's okay. And you still may have flares. I mean, I would imagine you don't feel like you're in absolutely perfect health absolutely every day. Like some days you might have a little headache now, or
Yeah.
neck tension, or a joint pain here or there, but it's less triggering to the whole system to be
Mhm.
highly reactive. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. We're a process, right? It's not like "Phew, one and done. Now I go back to where I was. It's a constant process. And as you said, it's a lifestyle of or lifetime of thinking and behaving. And sometimes I do slip back into my people pleasing and perfectionism. Gotta get it done. What if I don't get my to do list done? I mean, even now we're getting ready to go away on vacation next
Mhm.
week. I'm going to be gone for a month. And it's like, oh, I got so much to do. And I go, okay, Jane, stop putting the pressure on yourself. It's okay. It's fine, right? So I got a little bit of a headache yesterday, and so I had to remind myself it's okay. It's like, what if I didn't get it all done? Still fine. Still
Yeah,
good,
still fine.
right?
Yeah. And I do believe that's a really dramatic mindset shift because we are having to unwind so many years of, whatever the training was, even if you had a very healthy childhood and life, like there are still certain messages that are running through or certain levels of stress that kind of break the camel's back, if you will, whether
Yeah.
they're physical, whether you have like an injury or you have a death in the family or you go through a divorce. Like these things bring a lot of attention because they rattle the system significantly, but you sort of have two choices in that moment. You can be like, oh my gosh, like this ruined my life, and I can have total compassion for that. Like, yes, it can absolutely feel like that, and you deserve to sit in that feeling for as long as it takes.
Yeah.
And for your own sake, at some point, if you can find a little glimmer of standing on top of that peak and just feeling that
Mm.
sensation.
Yeah, I know, Jessica. I really feel for people when something comes along in your life that drastically changes your life and you're like, my life is never going to be the same again.
Mhm.
It's hard, even though I do believe like everything happens for us and there's gifts in it. Like I wouldn't be talking to you right now if
Yeah.
rheumatoid arthritis hadn't come into my life. So I do see it as a gift now. What did I see? Did I feel like it was a gift in the moment when I was in a lot of pain? Probably not.
Yeah,
No,
absolutely.
no,
Yeah.
definitely not. Right. But the thing is, and this is the hardest thing for people to grasp, that as long as we are stay in that mode, we cannot heal.
Yeah.
And so you can exercise your right to feel sorry for yourself, and that's okay. But the future you, if you want the future you to experience life again and follow through on your dreams, then you have to start making changes when you feel ready. And but you don't have to. You can stay where you are. Totally fine, but the chances of healing are probably, I would say, not going to happen.
Lower, not at least you may be able to manage symptoms
Yep. Yep.
to a decent level.
Yep.
But you're right. And that's very hard because I think we want to be clear here that we're not saying that your endometriosis, your autoimmune disease, your chronic infection, your dysautonomia, your MCAS, your mold toxicity is in your head, because
No.
it's not. There are real physical manifestations of this. And you have to work on both of these systems to really improve it. And I think that's getting more and more true, because when I talk with naturopaths, who have been in the field, I've been doing this for 25 years. When I talk with my naturopathic and functional medicine colleagues, and we've all been doing this for 20, 30 years, there has been a level of worsening of the physical symptoms, because
Mhm.
we are exposed to more toxins than we used to be. Like glyphosate didn't even exist in
Yeah.
1990s, until 1990s. Um,
EMF.
EMFs, viral loads, lots of impacts to our gut microbiome, microplastics in all of our food. I mean, our food and clothes. So there's not like a clean, pristine environment anymore. Not that we used to have a lot more coal in the air. Like there's been challenges throughout history, but I think anyone who's been in clinical practice for an extended period of time now in the last 2, 3 decades recognizes that the physical illnesses are getting more complicated. And so this becomes even more important
Mm-hmm.
and also a little bit more challenging because you can easily get on your phone and research rheumatoid arthritis and be, immersed in you're going to be in a wheelchair in 2 years, like this has destroyed my life, like lots of scary stories like that. So one of the tricks I found in my practice is to help people find the stories like yours
Yeah.
where, look, everyone has the ache or pain here and there, the stress manifestation, but the better and better practiced you are at the kind of thing that you're talking about, the less impactful it is. And in 3 or 4 years, if you're literally sitting in a wheelchair right now, in 3 or 4 years, you could be going on vacation for a month.
And you'll be healing along the way, right? So your symptoms
Mhm.
will not necessarily be in a straight line. They might go up, they might go down, right? So this is healing and this is healing. Both are healing. Um, yeah, I think it's really important to be aware of what's like what who you're surrounding yourself with, the stories that you're letting yourself read, because you will find evidence of people who haven't healed. You will find evidence of people who have healed. I did that in the beginning. I was like finding people that had healed,
Mm,
and I was searching for that. But most people, if they just do a search for, diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, they may not get those stories showing up. And
no.
also, I've noticed like there's a lot of Facebook groups, for example, of
Mm,
support groups and you go into those support groups, and it's not very supportive. It's very fear inducing. People posting pictures of their deformed, you know,
joints and
finger.
stuff. Yeah.
It's very scary, right? So
Yeah.
be careful of what you allow. Like protect your thoughts and what's going in, like as if your life depends on it, because your life does depend on it.
Yes. Yeah. So this is not in your head. You're not making it up.
No.
And we have to use tools that are different from just directly altering biochemistry via nutrition, supplements,
Yeah.
medication, surgery. I think this is one way to really frame this is we have the opportunity
Hmm.
to use our own brains to shift our own biochemistry
I
and
know.
and physiology, which is pretty dramatic. I think, just to circle back, that story, if we have stories in the literature of people with multiple personalities disorder and literally having different blood chemistry in one personality versus the other, it shows what a fascinating and valuable tool your own
Hmm.
brain is
Yeah.
if you can learn how to use it.
And I find, Jessica, it's empowering, right?
Mhm.
Because we've all been very conditioned to a disempowering model where we go to someone else and put our healing in their hands. And,
Mhm.
maybe that's okay, but I think we haven't really been taught that fundamentally and foundationally, we are the ones that create that healing environment.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's empowering as opposed to
Yeah.
disempowering, but it takes a little bit of it. It's a paradigm shift, right? So for people to think, what? I I am the one that can do this? And actually no one else can do it. It
Right.
has to be you that does it.
Yeah, for sure. This has been a really important conversation because people with complex chronic illness really need the tools to learn how to do this.
Mhm.
And your work is doing a great job of it. That's what health coaches do. That's what we train in our programs. That's what our coaches are out doing. That's what we do in our practice here at IWHI. And I think people really need to understand what health coaches do. And this is one of our most important roles. So thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you, Jessica, for the opportunity. I love it. I love getting healing stories out there because it shifts people into hope
Yeah.
and then empowerment, right? So good.
Yes, thank you. So, where can people find you, learn more about your work, all of that?
My website is thewellnessengineer.com, and I'm on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook. Search either Jane Hogan Health or The Wellness Engineer. And I have a podcast, Wellness by Design. You've been a guest on the podcast before. So I'm doing what I can to spread the word and give people hope. And I love blending together the proven science and these, sometimes what we might think of as spiritual practices as well, but that have been around for thousands of years that really do work because they calm our nervous system.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for all that. And we'll share links to all of Jane's tools and her work in the show notes. Thanks again for being here. And thanks everyone for joining us for today's episode of the Integrative Women's Health Podcast. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you.